Do you ever use the internet or computer? No? Yeah. You must know Wikipedia. Yeah? Wikipedia?
Wikipedia. ये
Wikipedia?
website है, online encyclopedia.
Wikipedia. No, sir, I'm
You
not
don't know it.
such a...
That's no problem. Oh, this is good.
Yeah, it's basic, some stories and poems.
Stories and poems. Good. You know the website Wikipedia?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm the founder of Wikipedia.
Okay, hi.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, very nice to meet you. I'm excited when someone knows Wikipedia, so it's good.
Have a seat, please. Please have a seat.
You know Wikipedia?
Yeah.
You've seen it? Yeah? No. No? Okay. Yeah, it's my website. So look, anyone can edit this website. This is Hindi, right?
Yes.
What's it say? You see something wrong?
No, they say everything.
It is written 1,000 years old Varanasi, but I can't believe it is 5,000 years old.
Well, this is 1,000?
It is written 1,000 here,
Oh.
but I can't believe.
So I want to show you. It's really 5,000, yeah.
You can change it. This website you can change.
You can change it. So look, we can click here.
Change.
What does it say?
Change, yes.
Change, yeah.
Yeah.
So now it's fixed.
Yeah.
Imagine a world in which every single person on the planet is given free access to the sum of all human knowledge. That's what we're doing. When you change the way you come to know things, you change your capability. And what that means is that it's not just a shift in the accessibility of knowledge, it's an ontological shift in knowledge itself.
We had in the 20th century read-only labor, read-only culture, read-only power.
Read-only culture is culture that comes to you to be consumed only. So you watch a television show or you listen to a CD. Much of, printed culture is like that.
Passive, powerful, controlling, centralized, read-only society. That was the 20th century. But fortunately, that century is over. That century is past. 21st century is the revival of a different way to organize and produce within society.
Read-write culture invites you to consume and to add back.
And it's the internet which has enabled the explosion of this new read-writing culture.
People can now participate in the creation of content. And rather than just reading an encyclopedia, you can write one.
The new digital revolution that we're living through has changed the very notion of the organization of knowledge. Wikipedia is an example of a collaborative worldwide effort that could have never been envisaged without the new technology. It is the child of this century.
Wikipedia is a free encyclopedia that's written by thousands of volunteers all over the world.
You thought you were going to be the audience. No, you're part of the performance.
Wikipedia uses a web technology called a wiki.
Wiki, it's a term adapted from the Hawaiian word for speed.
I said, well, I need to give this a good name. I showed up in Hawaii the first time. The clerk says, take the Wiki bus. Wiki is Hawaiian for quick. And I said, oh yeah, this will be good.
A wiki is a website that can be altered in real time by anyone who has privileges to do so. And in Wikipedia's case, that's all of us.
Everyone, all the people on the internet, everybody potentially could be a Wikipedia.
You can start a page on almost anything you want. However, according to Wikipedia's policies, the article should be notable or worthy of notice. You can create an account establishing a username for yourself. or you can edit anonymously. It all starts with the Edit button. Say you create a page on nuclear power. You can add text, pictures, and most importantly, your references.
For Wikipedia, because it's encyclopedia, everything has to be factual.
No original research. You can't say, I think this. You can't put that on Wikipedia. That's not an encyclopedia. A Wikipedia article has cited sources.
Over time, anyone can come and make changes to the article.
Because editing sometimes means correcting something that's wrong. But sometimes it means breaking something out into a new category or topic.
Wikipedia keeps an archive of all of its edits. On the History tab, you can see all the previous edits made in the article. Wikipedia attempts to be a neutral encyclopedia without bias. However, people often disagree on the presentation of the article. The Discussion tab lets you see what people are arguing about.
There's people who say nuclear power is terrible. There's people who say, no, it's wonderful, it's safe and non-polluting.
One editor comes to the article to add something. If someone disagrees with the new information, it can be changed. If the original editor disagrees with the new change, he or she can simply revert it.
If there are 3 such reverts happening in any 24 hours, then it's an edit war. We encourage people to communicate and discuss the issue and to reach some consensus.
It's not the mission of Wikipedia to tell the public whether nuclear power is good or bad. It's the mission of that article to say that there are arguments on both sides and to let the reader decide.
An online search for information often ends up at the website Wikipedia.
Wikipedia.
Wikipedia. Wikipedia is now the 9th most popular website on the internet.
Wikipedia is able to show up really early in Google searches because Jimbo Wales made an agreement with Google. I have no idea whether it's a money deal or what, but it's certainly mutually advantageous to both Google and Wikipedia for there to be a partnership.
We're the 12th most popular in India. We're the 6th most popular in Germany, the 12th most popular in Japan, and the 12th most popular in Iran.
Out of 100 people, 8 people eventually will end up on Wikipedia on a daily basis.
Wikipedia is so big that everybody wants to be part of it. It's like the de facto source of knowledge for the entire world now.
Although we have more than 1.5 million articles in English, this is actually less than 1/3 of the total work. More people see Wikipedia each day than see CNN and the BBC combined.
He's created a website that's interesting. It's loaded with information that's good, sound, solid, but it's also loaded with information that's unreliable. And depending on when you go in there to Wikipedia and what you're looking for, you can get burned badly.
Information is flowing onto the web that is unedited, unmonitored, and is not answerable to anyone. That is a dangerous situation.
Wikipedia can, in a sense, control what people think. They paint themselves as a democracy with a neutral point of view, and neither are true.
I actually do think Wikipedia is an amazing thing. It is the first place I go when I'm looking for knowledge or when I want to create some. Fabulous. Jimmy, thank you so much for stopping by.
There's no one in control. It's intellectual and cultural anarchy.
Any user can change any entry, and if enough other users agree with them, it becomes true.
Why wait for somebody else to write history when you can write it or rewrite it yourself?
If you're in a situation where you absolutely have to be spot on correct, don't trust it.
Everybody is an editor on Wikipedia, so nobody's an editor.
I don't trust Wikipedia.
Published encyclopedias are written by experts. The problem, of course, with Wikipedia is that anyone can put their 2 cents in, and they do.
Readers make modifications. You don't know whether those modifications are any more accurate than the original was.
An infinite number of anonymous editors, you don't have the ability to make a judgment about the source.
I think most people would be surprised to find out that the people who run the site are known only by names like Derova and Slim Virgin.
You have no idea who wrote what, for what purpose,
what the writer's qualifications, state of knowledge, may be. Traditionally, anonymity in written materials has been associated with such things as ransom notes, poison pen letters, graffiti, and the anonymity was, quite straightforwardly, a way of avoiding responsibility for what's been written.
There is a First Amendment right to anonymity. No doubt about it. The pamphleteers in the early days of this country, most of them were anonymous. And if there's some reason to do that, I can understand it. But nobody at Wikipedia knows who writes what.
The greatness of free speech is that everybody has the right to publish their own opinions, stand behind them, without being penalized legally for having those opinions. But the kind of free speech we have on Wikipedia, in which anybody says anything and can't be held accountable for them, well, you don't need a First Amendment to protect that kind of free speech because nobody knows who these people are.
The way I like to explain this to people is there's anonymity, and then there's real names, and then in the middle somewhere is pseudonymity, where you've got a pseudonym, but it's a stable identity, and that you're willing to stand behind it. And so you create a username, and you start working under that one username, and you start generating a reputation. That's very different from anonymity, which in anonymity, it's really about sort of hit and run, like, you know, every day you're a different person, right? And every day you have a different name. That's really hard because then you don't build up a reputation, you don't get this kind of history of trust over time.
Even if you can look at an archive and find out what they said about Susan Jacoby on May 2007 as opposed to May 2008. So what? Who knows who's written it? Who knows if it's not an old lover who hates me who put the entry? You don't know that.
It doesn't really matter who you are. Maybe you're a gifted teenager, right? Or maybe you're a respected professor of biology who happens to embarrassingly be a fan of Britney Spears, and you want to write about pop culture or something. You really don't want to do it under your real name. Hey, that's great. And who your real name is, why should that matter, right? What really matters is what work you've done.
Finally tonight, a matter of trust online. A recent case of a Wikipedia contributor lying about his credentials is raising doubts about its accuracy.
Classic epitomization, I think, of the kind of activist involved in Wikipedia. Dropped out of 3 Kentucky colleges, not successful in academic life. So what did he do? He reinvented himself on Wikipedia, and he claimed that he had 3 advanced degrees in theology, of all things. I don't know why he chose theology. Having done that, he spent his time bullying other people, perhaps real PhDs in theology, about his expertise in theology.
Essjay edited some 16,000 entries, at one point defending a book called Catholicism for Dummies, saying, I would hang my own PhD on its credibility.
The biggest irony of the Essjay scandal is that Essjay was outed by mainstream media. He was outed by Stacy Schiff in the New Yorker magazine. And in an even worse context, Wales defended him at first. And it was only when it became a public scandal that Wales was actually forced to get rid of Essjay.
Even to this day, I defend him. This is a young man who made a mistake. And in the grand scheme of things, what he did is pretty minor. Having a pseudonym and sort of fleshing it out with some traits, that's really no big deal. I mean, that's part of online life.
If Wales really wanted to establish Wikipedia as a serious intellectual enterprise, he would reveal who these people are. The fact that he doesn't tells me that there are many more Essjays in there than he would ever admit.
The truth of the matter is, there's a huge number of people editing this encyclopedia who are completely anonymous. There's much talk within the community of the so-called ruling clique, the administrators with the most power. Now, officially, there's no ruling clique, okay? There is no inner circle. But in practice, there is.
A very, very small number of people are doing a very large percentage of the work.
About 50% of all the edits were being written by these top 1% of editors.
You don't know who they are. You don't know if they have a conflict of interest. And it's the 8th most popular site on the web. And for better or for worse, this is where people get their information. And this core group of people has the power.
The cabal, if you like, who we are supposed to trust simply because they are frequent contributors to Wikipedia, I think their cover has to be blown. We should know who they are. We should know what their take on life is. I mean, are they as bright and intelligent, as wise as one would hope an editor of a major publication is? We know who the editor of the New York Times is. We know who the editor of The Guardian is. We should know who the uber editors of Wikipedia are too.
These kids between the ages of 13 and 29, the children of the baby boom, are the first generation to grow up digital. And these kids are different. Rather than watching TV, they've grown up interacting. They process information differently. And in many ways, they're driving this whole collaborative revolution.
Well, I think like a lot of people, I became aware of Wikipedia because you would search for something on Google and you would notice the Wikipedia link was right at the top of the page. So even before I'd actually used Wikipedia, I'd heard of it. The first article I ever edited was called Long Way Round, which is the documentary that Ewan McGregor made when he took a motorbike around the world from Europe through Asia over to America and back around again. And the article was maybe, 1 or 2 paragraphs. So I said, right, that's gonna change. And then I spent a whole day editing Long Way Round. And then from then just graduated to editing more about where I lived in Scotland. It wasn't very well covered. Lots of, bands that I like and lots of skateboarding issues weren't really well covered. So I just started editing more and more and more. It snowballed when I started getting more into the community and more into about how Wikipedia works. You could say that I'm different in a lot of ways because I'm not really techie, but maybe there's a slightly more diverse base of the people who are really interested in Wikipedia than people think.
There's in the left bar of Wikipedia in English, they have other languages also. Then I saw, oh, Bahasa Indonesia, nice! I don't have to translate. Then I click Bahasa Indonesia, there's nothing in it. So I'll translate from the English, put it in Bahasa Indonesia. The thing is, in here, internet is expensive, and we don't have a lot of money. Some of the content, I scan it, then I put it in text. Then it's going to be ruined, so it has to be edited. I edit it, and I edit it according to Wikipedian's rule. It's a lot of work, but it works.
That's what's so cool about Wikipedia. You prove yourself, you've got the content, it doesn't matter who you are or whether you have the power or the recognition.
Această limbă este limba română. That's Romanian.
I think this is the first article I actually wrote myself. It's about the Ryukyuan languages that are spoken in part of Japan.
I'm an amateur linguist. I can really only communicate sufficiently in Japanese and Spanish, and I know some Romanian, more than the other languages I know. Ya'e, Shi'e, Mark, Ilagana, Keji. That's Navajo. It's been a while since I studied Arabic.
This is the Sicilian Wikipedia. I have only written maybe 5 articles here because I don't really know Sicilian. The work I did was requesting it and then arguing in favor of it when people didn't necessarily think it should be created. When I was in 5th grade, I switched schools to a program for gifted kids. And that was a lot better for me. I definitely fit in better. People weren't taunting me because I was different anymore.
And when he was about 5, he asked me to get him Chinese lessons. And I really regret that. I know, I really regret that I thought, oh, come on, who's going to find group lessons for a 5-year-old in Chinese? And I said,
You didn't even look.
I didn't, because I thought, well, who would ever have it? It's not like we live in LA.
The Yiddish Wikipedia, near the beginning, I was the only editor, pretty much. I don't want to say that it wouldn't have taken off without me, but I think it's much easier to see something that's already there with content and want to add on to it than to see something that says there's nothing here. So that kind of jump starts things if you just put a little bit of something there, even if it's not completely correct, if you try your best.
This is the first time in human history when young people are an authority about something really important. I was an authority about model trains when I was a kid, and today young people are authorities on this big revolution that's changing every institution in society.
I wanted to thank everyone, and if you see people wandering around with staff shirts, hug them. That's right.
Like you're part of a very, very big family. It's more than just an encyclopedia, it's a whole way of life, kind of. It's a culture. And it's just being part of something good.
Well, for me, Wikipedia is just a passion. And I'm quite convinced myself that I'm at least doing the right thing, that I'm at least spending my energy positively.
Information and knowledge, that is the most wonderful product of all. It is the only product that I can give you and still retain. And both of us become the richer for it.
When we first meet a few days ago, we feel like we were old friends.
And we wrote this article, The Freedom of Speech.
I'm a scientist by training. This article is on HIV.
If I feel bored or upset, I think write article will cheer me up.
Yes, I'm very addicted to Wikipedia. I can't miss a single day without contributing to Wikipedia. Let me show you again once more my contributions. We learned the article about surgery, many articles about anatomy, and many other things. It's very special feeling. You're doing something that's beneficial to others. I feel great.
Is something you're contributing to maybe a school kid in Africa, or maybe to someone who is just learning geometry in a country you've never visited before. And it's that thrill.
Just having a job, having a family would not be enough by the end of my life. So I need to find something that is a participation to the common goods. So that's it.
It was the first website for me which had an edit button. And now it's become normal for me. I actually miss it when I visit other websites. I see all these mistakes and I say, well, that's stupid. They don't have an edit button.
I'm a skeptic at first because, I don't trust that, this thing everybody can edit it. But in fact, I can see the system works.
Wikipedia is becoming sort of like a lighthouse to explain to people how they can collaborate differently as peers. We're used to collaborating within corporations in terms of hierarchies. And Wikipedia shows that, no, that people can now work together as peers.
There's this belief in this ideal. And the question is, are they being successful in carrying out that mission, right? Is it truly the case that anyone can participate in the process? And that's really, I think, at the root of what we mean by a utopian sort of democratic system, is that the minority voices are heard as well.
A lot of people have this idea of Wikipedia. It's like millions of people all contributing a couple sentences and somehow it magically becomes an encyclopedia, but it's not true. And it really is not a democracy, right? There's a whole internal social structure to it.
Anytime you have an open access system like this, you are going to award authority to the people who spend the most time with it.
It's a few hundred at most activists who've got nothing better to do with their time than argue online about Wikipedia entries.
We've come across people who spend more than 40 hours a week on Wikipedia doing the work there.
Those who spend a lot of time with it developing a sense of territorialism over the subjects that they feel very passionately about and spend a lot of time editing and updating.
You have this hierarchy within the community. Contributors, administrators with a bit more power, the ability to ban users. If you become part of this inner circle, it's incredibly easy to rig the content, to hijack an article, to further your own agenda, to lock down an article so no one else can edit it, to ban people. It's a very close-knit group, and anyone who's outside that group, they're extremely wary of. There's this overarching paranoia that people from outside the community are trying to bring it down. If you're not known by the community, you go into an article and start editing, there's a pretty good chance that you'll be blocked, if not banned from the site. It's just a fact nowadays. One of the core contributors, known only as Darova, was sure that a relatively new editor was sent by this attack site called Wikipedia Review. Her evidence for this was that this new account was much too productive. He was trying much too hard to build a really fine encyclopedia. And it stood to reason, she thought, that because he was so productive and was relatively new to a site, that he must be sent by this attack site to undo her and the rest of the inner circle and the entire encyclopedia. So she banned him. This sort of thing goes on all the time. A perfectly good editor who was merely trying to build a decent encyclopedia was banned.
Wikipedia articles tend to converge toward the shared understanding of the most active or most aggressive contributors to Wikipedia.
If you can control an article, you can, in a sense, control what people think. People go to Wikipedia because they think that it has a neutral point of view. They think that they can go to Wikipedia for the facts.
Well, I had heard of Wikipedia, of course. I knew that everybody could contribute, anybody could contribute. High school teacher, social studies teacher told me it was intellectual democracy, and I sort of accepted that. And then one day, an old friend called me on the phone and said, have you seen what Wikipedia has done to you? And I said, no, I haven't. And he said, well, Google yourself, hit the Wikipedia link, and sue the bastards. Jimmy Wales had said, studies now indicate we get any mistakes down in 5 minutes. Well, I'd been up as a suspected assassin and defector to the Soviet Union for 4.5 months. It was clear to me I had to do something. I said what had happened to me. I said, this is an unreliable research tool in USA Today. It was interesting that after I went public, I heard from furious Wikipedians, angry about what I'd written. Wikipedians focused on my website and defamed me again and again and again.
Online and under fire, web resource, Wikipedia is an internet encyclopedia that anyone can use.
Some vandals came online, contributed to that encyclopedia, that biography of me, and it was, I'll tell you, it was salacious, homophobic. It even took me from the position of being a suspect murderer to being a murderer. He killed Kennedy, he said it over again, and then concluded with the words, murdering expletive.
It's not just individuals like John, but me and many other people that just have concerns that this is creating gossip that can be very harmful. And people go to these sites thinking that this is the truth.
First of all, our disclaimer is really patterned after the disclaimers that you'll find on any website. If you go to Britannica and read their disclaimer, or the New York Times and read their disclaimer, it's a very standard type of disclaimer that you have on any website.
The disclaimer, if you read it, says we're not accountable. And there's no other way to explain what that disclaimer says. We're not accountable. And with accountability comes credibility, you know? But the only way you get credibility is just make people sign their names.
A lot of things happened. We had a lot of news this year. One of the biggest things that you can remember was the whole Siegenthaler controversy. For those of you who somehow don't know what this is all about, well, apparently there was an error in Wikipedia. Who knew? So this error was found in Wikipedia, and Siegenthaler, who I will say was a really bad error, and it was a terrible thing that was written about him in the encyclopedia. It was fixed very quickly as soon as we realized it. They dragged me on CNN to yell at me, and that was about here in... And as you can see, it almost killed us. Our traffic essentially tripled in a short period of time.
A whole class of students were laughing about it and making fun of me about it. I mean, that is just basically wrong. And you know, There's that old story, put the buzz bombs up in the air. If they fall on somebody, I have nothing to do with it. I just shoot them up. I don't know where they come down. I mean, that's sort of the concept, you know. Anybody who wants to put a bomb on Wikipedia that's going to explode in somebody's family's face can do it. And it explodes. And Jimmy says, oh, I don't know who did it.
My position in the world is really funny to me because a few years ago, I was just this guy, you know, I'm sitting at home in my pajamas, you know, typing on the internet like anybody else. And now I've, you know, Bono's inviting me to go to a party in Switzerland, and that's kind of weird.
Didn't really realize that Wikipedia is going to be this huge, enormous phenomenon. It was truly just a hobby. I remember I got a call out of the blue, really, to come and speak at a conference in Berlin. And I was like, wow, Berlin, right? I'd never been out of the country, basically. And I'm like, wow, I can't believe, like, somebody wants me to come and speak in Berlin. So what we did is we made it a whole big family trip and took 5 weeks off and went over to sort of tour Europe.
It has the Eiffel Tower on it.
Oh, so this is just like famous monuments? Okay, who's been there?
True vacation we haven't done
True vacation
in a long time.
I mean, the closest thing was like those few days in Lusaba.
When we were in South Africa.
Like we were in Japan, that was kind of a vacation, right? So we were somewhere interesting. We had time to like do some tourist stuff and so forth. But it was also just like while I was working there and living there, so.
Right. But that was good because we were in the same place for a month, and Jimmy didn't travel, so we actually all slept in the same apartment every night for 30 days, which hadn't happened in years.
Exactly. And it happened very quickly then. After the trip to Europe, started getting more and more invitations. The traffic kept growing. I began to realize that when I would travel, I could do press and cause traffic to go up. Thought that was important. Started getting more and more phone calls every day, getting interviews. I like traveling. I like, especially by train, every couple of days. That's fine.
You like traveling? It's pretty obvious.
Oh yeah, I guess so. And then when I'm home, like there's nothing going on here, so I can just sort of chill out at home. So that's kind of good.
You're not home that much anymore.
That's true.
Let's practice the knock.
Oh yeah. This is a quick look. When the PC revolution happened, like in the early 80s, there were lots of companies starting building PCs and selling them. You know, I was looking up prices of motherboards and what would it cost to start building computers. And so that was kind of where I was. When I saw this internet thing going on, I'm like, you know, I don't want to be sitting here, you know, 10 years later going, yeah, see, I knew the internet was going to be big, but I didn't do anything about it. So that was when I started Bombas.
The search portal, Bombas.com, was founded in 1996. Its goal was to cash in on advertising on the site.
Bombas was billed as a web ring-based search engine.
Rather than providing search results, Bombas allowed users to have a hand in creating content. As time went on, they found one idea in particular to be extremely popular.
They started something called the Bombas Babe Report. I don't know too many details about that end of the business and didn't want to know.
You know, the press has this idea that I'm porn king. I'm like, I really wasn't the king of anything, frankly, you know? Because at the time, when we looked at it, we were just like, okay, well, this is what our customers want, let's follow this.
Having achieved modest success with Bombas, Wales began to think about other ways to exploit user-generated content.
I had been thinking a lot about this idea of people can come together and collaborate to build stuff, right? And so Nupedia was the first effort.
Wales actually hired Larry Sanger, who was a philosophy professor.
And Jimmy Wales offered me the job of being editor-in-chief of Nupedia.
The theory was that anyone could write articles for the Nupedia by submitting through email.
They started Nupedia as a conventional encyclopedia where they were going to have experts and PhDs.
Experts would vet, edit, approve, and then post finished articles to the new site.
The problem is a 7-step process of draft and edit and re-edit and fact-checking and everything. But it looked like from all of our experiences on how to create an encyclopedia, that's certainly the right way to go. Right? You get smart people who have pedigrees.
But after 8 months, only 2 full-length articles had been published.
The certification process was so difficult and was taking so long that the project began to fizzle. And then Larry found out about wiki software.
He came to my site, wrote on a page, do you think that this wiki idea would work to build an encyclopedia? I said yes.
I think it was minutes, almost immediately after he had just described the concept of a wiki. I thought this could be the solution to our problems. We named a new project, Wikipedia, that's a name I came up with, and launched 5 days later.
Sanger in Wales anticipated that the wiki would generate a variety of rough draft articles to then be put through the Nupedia system.
And then the crash came, and the crash just basically blew everything up.
Well, no one is officially calling it a crash, but it sure looks and feels that way to many.
And that was the story of a lot of .coms, right? It was just a disaster.
In December of 2001, Jimmy tried to sell ads for Nupedia and Wikipedia, but he didn't have any luck.
The amount of traffic was so low and there was no ad revenue that it was just like, whatever, let's just put it in the nonprofit.
Tossed away as a lost cause, Wikipedia, although created as a for-profit endeavor, was handed over to the community.
Larry decided, well, let's just put all these articles on the wiki and then open it up to the world and see what happens. And it turned out that a lot of people went on and started editing it.
It just rocketed with success. There's tens of thousands of articles being added to Wikipedia, and it just kind of left the Nupedia model in the dust.
So for me, that's kind of an interesting quirk of history. Had the crash not happened, Wikipedia might not have happened. So, you know, I'm a nice guy and everything, but, you know, if somebody said, well, gee, you know, write you personally a check for $100 million if we put some ads on Wikipedia, I'd probably say, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, right? Pretty much what I do every day.
Yeah, just walk down the red carpet, get dressed up.
Wave at the crowds.
When he first started leaving me out of the story, it was extremely disappointing to me. It isn't something that I would have thought Jimmy was capable of.
Jimmy Wales des. America des. Internet des.
I named the thing, I led the thing. I think that that means that I was also a founder, but other people disagree. Well, at least one other person disagrees.
I mean, one of the guys, his name was Larry Sanger.
Mm-hmm.
He co-founded Wikipedia with him.
He says.
Okay.
The weight of words will end transmission.
Hi, Warren. Hi, nice to meet you, Warren. And then
you have to basically suck the liquid right through the center of it.
Yep. It's in Wikipedia. So I want to see a new picture in the Wikipedia article. There's already one there. I don't know who it is, but that guy's got to go. I'm the new guy.
He's such a great guy. I mean, come on, think of it. He's created the world's largest reference, and he's giving it away for free.
Jimmy Wales is the guy with a bright idea. He's also the guy with a big head. You know, it's like, what else can I say?
My work is my art.
He's the person that we look to for guidance in cases where we do not know which way to walk. We are a democracy with a benevolent dictator.
Anyone can just come and click on the edit link.
Anything he does, even if it's like a random offhand remark, is considered gospel.
He is sometimes referred to as the God King.
It's a lot like a cult. Even Jimmy Wales refers to himself as the Wikipedia spiritual leader.
I call it servant leadership. In other words, you lead people by being there to support them. And kind of spiritual leader, right, which is something I take pretty seriously.
He doesn't have the cultural or intellectual background to do anything.
The Serbians gave me this, or the Croatians. I'm sure it matters a lot, which is which, but...
In any way.
Here's my honorary doctorate.
I think a lot of people just hear a lot about him, so they treat him as like this god before they even talk to him at all, which is kind of disturbing to me.
You know, I'm happy, but I also have a desire to do more things, bigger things.
That's the interesting thing about Wales, is he's rebuilt himself as this sort of altruistic public intellectual, as the lead on Wikipedia, and I don't think that probably really reflects the kind of person he is. But there's something ironic about a self-proclaimed entrepreneur, not a political activist, not really an intellectual, who stumbled on the holy grail of this generation of internet businesses and hasn't made a penny out of it. It's hard to imagine that he's not unhappy by the fact that he hasn't become a multi-millionaire, if not a billionaire, which, had it been a for-profit, he would, of course, been. It's rather like turning up the winning lottery ticket and then realizing you can't cash it. There's something tragic about that. It's easy for me to laugh. I never found the ticket. My biggest problem with Wikipedia is it doesn't create a hierarchy of knowledge. There is no one at the heart of Wikipedia saying that the entry on Pamela Anderson should be shorter or longer than that on Hannah Arendt.
That's a really strange argument. You know, Harry Potter, last I checked, is longer than Hamlet. Should someone have said, actually, Harry Potter's not as important as Hamlet, therefore it should be shorter. The fact that a pop novel is, you know, this long and Hamlet's this long, it's no problem. And the same thing, if one entry in Wikipedia is longer than another one, they don't compete with each other. They're completely separate entities. It's not like an encyclopedia where we say, look, we've got 30 volumes, and so we have to cut, we have to limit somewhere.
Jimmy, somebody who's not familiar with American culture or not media savvy or literate may not understand that Hamlet's more important than Harry Potter. But a lot of people use this as serious education.
Yes, I'm not really sure what you're saying.
The Pamela Anderson entry on Wikipedia, it's incredibly well researched. It's as detailed, as sophisticated as the entry on Hannah Arendt, and perhaps the most influential political theorist of the 20th century. And again, it's fine if you know there's a difference, but for the kids now coming online, they would think actually that Pamela Anderson is important. So this is profoundly subversive. It's surreal in its consequences. All knowledge comes with sociocultural, historic and economic baggage. That's what media literacy is about. That's why when we read the New York Times, we have some context. We know, for example, the New York Times is culturally and politically liberal or pro-Israel, and we're able to read through those things. The problem with Wikipedia, we're not able to interpret the context because we don't know who's producing the information. And ultimately, when Jimmy stands back and says, well, that's none of my business, you know, who am I to say that Pamela Anderson is less or more important than the concept of truth, or Marie Curie, or Hannah Arendt. Ultimately, for those people who go to Wikipedia who have no media literacy, I am fearful that in this open source, free knowledge universe, we are going to be educating people who are not able to evaluate not so much the accuracy of information, but the importance of information.
It's kind of like saying, if we had a debate in the early era of the automobile, and we said, wow, you know, the automobile is going to devastate the horseshoe industry, and it's going to cause pollution and noise, and a lot of people are going to get killed in car wrecks, and a lot of bad things are going to happen, but there's also this good stuff that's going to happen. Well, you can debate about it all you want, but that genie's not going back in the bottle, so, you know.
I think Jimmy Wales is himself a very good example of a Web 2.0 idealist. His thinking, if that's what you want to call it, if you want to be kind to him, is rooted in the libertarian philosophy of Ayn Rand. In my view, a very childish theory which suggests that all authority is derived internally and that we should be suspicious of all forms of external authority, whether it's the family, the church, religion, the state in particular.
I would just as soon pull out my fingernails as have to reread Ayn Rand, whom I thought was absolutely wonderful when I was 15, and every 15-year-old thinks Ayn Rand is wonderful. That's why 15-year-olds shouldn't be writing encyclopedias. Ayn Rand's view of human relationships is well stated in that interminable, silly novel, The Fountainhead, which was made into an equally silly but more entertaining movie. The only proper relationship between human beings is hands-off.
Yeah, I remember when I was a college student and I read The Fountainhead, and it had a great impact on me, both you know, aesthetically and also just thinking about what kinds of people do I admire.
What kind of person do I want to be?
No creator was prompted by a desire to please his brothers. His truth was his only motive. His work was his only goal.
I am challenging the base of all these institutions. I'm challenging the moral code of altruism. I say that man is entitled to his own happiness and that he must achieve it himself.
When I say, you know, I want to distribute a free encyclopedia to everyone, it's funny because I don't, like, my motivation is not like altruism. Like, it's not like I want to save these people or whatever.
He served nothing and no one. He lived for himself. And only by living for himself was he able to achieve the things which are the glory of mankind. Such is the nature of achievement.
You believe that there should be no such thing as welfare legislation, unemployment compensation.
That's right. I'm opposed to all forms of control. I am for an absolute, laissez-faire, free, unregulated economy.
Government is typically an instrument of force. You know, you tax people whether they like it or not, and then you pass a law to make people do stuff, and it's just not my style. My outlook on the world is an individual rights outlook. Respecting people's rights to live their lives as they choose. The idea that if we really want to achieve positive social change, it's really important that we do so through reason and persuasion rather than force.
Wales's ideology, of course, is borne out on lots of different levels in Wikipedia. He doesn't trust people with authority. He doesn't trust experts. He doesn't trust professionals.
When experts do show up to Wikipedia, which happens fairly often, they're confronted with a real meritocracy, and the idea that I'm this very important professor doesn't necessarily get you very far.
I have always thought that it's a grand thing to allow the general public to have a really vigorous role in a collaborative knowledge project. But as far as Wikipedians are concerned, it fundamentally does not matter what credentials a person has, what prior training they have. None of that matters.
Wales said very famously, I trust a high school child as much as I trust a Harvard professor. Now, this is a ludicrous thing to say.
You know, you may be a 15-year-old kid writing about the English nobility, and if you're doing a really good job, we don't really care who you are. That's great, you know? Why should we care?
Nowadays, we're in a time when elitism is frowned upon, scoffed at, derided. And I think that is wrong.
If you have expertise and if you come armed with credibility, then oftentimes in the Wikipedia environment, you're said to be biased, you know, heavily biased. So instead, Wikipedia biases for the non-experts.
If someone says, well, I have a PhD and therefore don't question me, right? This is the facts. That's complete nonsense, right? On the other hand, if somebody says, hey, look, I've really studied this and I can walk you through the steps, right? I can show you the evidence. I'm not just up here saying, you know, I'm a big important professor, so you have to believe me, but I'm actually willing to show you the information that lets you understand why I believe what I believe. That kind of authority is priceless, right?
That's the problem. I mean, people with real day jobs, families, friends, and even if they wanted to, they don't have the time to do this sort of thing. I mean, it requires a significant investment in time.
Time, I suppose, is the main reason I haven't contributed anything. And that's one of the reasons I value the contributions of others so much, because I realize how important my own time is.
The experts don't really have the time to be fighting this war. It's all of those people out there who have nothing better to do. They're the ones that are getting listened to.
Problem is that while I might write something that would be of good scholarly worth, someone may come along and then change the article that I write.
I mean, I've just finished writing a book about China, and there's a port on the east coast of China called Fuzhou. Basically, Fuzhou was, in the wartime, taken over by the Japanese, but extraordinarily, the Japanese relinquished control of it for a while, and the British rebuilt a consulate there. If you go to the entry for Fuzhou, there's no mention made of this. It's simply said it was invaded by the Japanese, end of story. So to get them to correct that, it took an awful lot of time, I mean, more time than I had.
Because if 3 or 4 people get together and gang up on some expert, you know, the expert then has to go, okay, well, I have to make a request for comment. And then at least one other person has to agree that, you know, there's a need for this process. So then that takes 2 or 3 weeks on one little point even. And then if that doesn't work, then they have to go to mediation. And, you know, I'm still on the mediation committee, actually, I can tell you. It doesn't work well.
In the end, I was exasperated and said, all right, well, they can just, you know, so fine. So it remains wrong.
There is no editorial board at Wikipedia that can go in and rescue this expert from the onslaught of the hordes.
There are certain people who make it their life's work to know stuff. It's ridiculous to not give them some, at least modest role in projects that document knowledge.
The Oxford English Dictionary took about 70 years to compile. What they did was they invited the general public to read everything, essentially, that had ever been written in the English language. And so they had volunteers, thousands, tens of thousands of them, all over the English-speaking world. Murray and his collaborators would receive tons and tons of post every day showing how words had been used in history. And they formed the basis of the Oxford English Dictionary. So it was an astonishingly democratic process. It was a bit like the general public, or the general English-speaking public, holding a great mirror up to itself and saying, this is how we speak, this is what we speak, this is what our language is. Some of these aggregators were complete lunatics. One of them was a certified lunatic. I mean, a chap that I wrote about, William Chester Minor, was brilliant in providing material for the OED. He produced hundreds of thousands of entries. He was a complete lunatic. He cut off his own penis. And I would not, I have to say, like him to have been the editor of the OED. He was mad. A lot of people who have this obsessive interest in facts are really strange people.
The comparison of the OED, which invited everybody in the world to submit words and citations, with Wikipedia is a good one. The major difference is that there are no experts at the top at Wikipedia saying, well, this is a word that's very common, and this is a word that's not so common.
So I would wish for the ways of the OED, where there is a wise body of people of enormous wisdom and knowledge who act ultimately as arbiters of what goes in. Now that I know, wise people are often old white men, and I know we want to get away from the opinions and thoughts and prejudices of old white men. I accept that this is a problem. But nonetheless, sometimes when I, as a researcher, am looking for things, I long for such people and wish the mob, and one should never trust the mob would just bite its tongue, keep quiet, and let an editor interpose him or herself and turn fuzziness into clarity.
It doesn't help us to have experts rewriting an entry sort of based on their own knowledge, which is, if they're somebody who's intimately involved in the field, is probably coming from a perspective that one could not call kind of universal and non-biased.
In Wikipedia, you can see every site and not just the site that the people who are highly educated, the professors, who decide what you can see, what you can't see, what the truth is or what not.
Let's not make too clear a distinction between the experts and the non-experts. The so-called expert has a point of view. The ordinary person has a point of view. Neither one of them is going to be able to present history in a way that avoids point of view.
It's impossible to have anything that's completely unbiased or for it to be seen as being unbiased because we all carry biases around in our heads.
One of the core values of Wikipedia is the value of neutrality. People have to find a way to come together and settle in on the core that they do agree on. I might have 1,000 things I can say about George W. Bush that I think are true, and you might have 1,000 things that you could say. We're gonna have to settle on those 800 that we can say. We do agree George Bush was the governor of Texas. We can also agree that some critics have said such and such about him, and that his supporters have said this. That process of negotiation, of discussion, ends up mostly working.
It's like this belief that the collective is like this oracle or like this God that has this ultimate knowledge, and the collective is all wise, and the collective can adjudicate any disputes in how to interpret history. And it's wrong. It's absolutely wrong. The collective is just made of whoever was the most, brazen of the edit warriors. And those people have no right to edit history any more than anybody else.
Achieving neutrality is not a good goal for anything. Neutrality and accuracy are two totally different things.
When people are radically skeptical about neutrality, I just think they're mistaken. I think there are lots and lots of statements that lots of people can agree on.
What is neutrality, for instance, about, let's say, Nazism?
You're doing a story about Adolf Hitler, and you're going to say that he's a monster. But to be objective, on the other hand, he also started the Volkswagen. Does that mean that that's an objective view of Hitler? No.
Same thing with global warming. There's so much evidence on this side and much less up here. So now a story that would balance those two things out exactly would be a false story.
The problem is the idea that there's one master description of reality, which works really well in mathematics and works very well in science, if not quite as perfectly, and really doesn't work at all in other subjects. If you apply it to history, humanities, arts, it's a problem.
All history is a matter of selecting out of an infinite number of facts. And the selection itself is inevitably biased.
Henry the Navigator, the German, the Portuguese, and the English one, they tell a different story. The German version is very factual and, tells you the life and what he did and everything. The Portuguese version is much more emphatic. I mean, he's quite a figure in Portugal. And the English version has a neutrality dispute about the fact of whether he was homosexual or not.
The truth is told about Columbus in traditional stories. He did a very daring thing. He was an excellent navigator. He was a religious man. All true. What is left out is the fact that he massacred, kidnapped, mutilated Indians in search of gold. Traditional history has a period which is always described as the progressive era. Progressive era refers to the first years of the 20th century, when reform laws were passed. Well, what that misses is that exactly in those years, more black people were lynched in this country, thousands and thousands, than at any other period in American history. The Civil War, battles, military heroism. You hardly ever learn that during the Civil War, more land was taken from the Indians out west than any other period in American history. More battles were fought, massacres took place in order to take Indian land. This is missing. You have decisions to make. Shall I acknowledge that this is just my point of view, or shall I pretend that this is objective, this is comprehensive, this is neutral?
What's worse, just telling a bold-faced lie or just telling part of the truth?
There's a reason for that oath that's given in court, to tell the truth, the whole truth. What's most deceptive is not when you lie outright, but when you tell the truth, but not the whole truth, when you leave out so much. Because if the person lies to you, you can check up on that. If the person leaves something out, you have no way of checking. You don't know what has been omitted. No, you're not going to get an objective history. In fact, it's impossible.
A few years ago, if you looked up some crazy thing, aardvarks or Archimedes, just any sort of odd topic, you would see all these wonderful websites maintained by people on a volunteer basis at universities or just on their own, and they were all different. You could smell the people in them. You could just tell, here's an individual with a point of view, and I just found that to be so wonderful. And now, the first entry is usually the Wikipedia entry, and then the next 3 pages are mirrors of the Wikipedia entry. And effectively, if you want to find out about something, you have to go to a lot of work to see anything but this collective product. And I think we've lost something. We've lost something of the whole purpose of the internet. I mean, originally, before there was the internet, there were plenty of encyclopedias that were at least good. I mean, the Britannica is at least okay. The whole point of the internet was to do new, better things, and I feel it's been a step backward.
Britannica 3, the new learning system for the new man in a new age.
Yes, well, this is the classic 11th edition of Britannica, which in its day, and that was about 1910 it was first published, was the supreme authority on knowledge, or information anyway, in the English-speaking world. Negro, on page 344 of volume 19. Mentally, the Negro is inferior to the white. We must necessarily suppose that the development of the Negro and the white proceeds on different lines. While with the latter, the volume of the brain grows with the expansion of the brain pan, in the former, the growth of the brain is, on the contrary, arrested by the premature closing of the cranial sutures and lateral pressure of the frontal bone. It's quite extraordinary. This was Holy Writ in 1910, 1911. Goodness knows it provided an informational basis for racism, for segregation, for all manner of injustice. And of course, it would be laughed out of court today. It's a highly offensive entry.
At Britannica, we tried to remember to describe what we were doing as setting down the state of our current knowledge. We certainly never claimed to be writing the truth.
Mores change. Solomon had 1,000 wives, and yet he was thought to be a moral person. I dare say we would not have the same judgment about him today if he still had 1,000 wives.
It just displays the fact, however, that knowledge is a creature of fashion.
When I started teaching in journalism in 1995, I had always thought that the internet was going to be the tool to fill in what I call this kind of media gap, the lack of good sources between what we consider the news and what we consider the history books.
In the fall of 1989, I was visiting our printing plant with a few of our editors, and suddenly word came on the news.
East Germany's borders have been opened wide, all of them. East and West Germans are celebrating the news.
They haven't printed that particular signature of that volume yet, although it's due to be printed in 2 days. Do we change it or do we let it go? And it was a very, very hard decision. And it was decided that we would change it. And we tore out the printing plates that had already been made. We had editors quickly rewriting several pages. Then the Berlin Wall came down, and the reunification of East and West Germany was on the table. And we had to go in and make changes on, as I recall, about 1,300 pages.
But Wikipedia has completely changed that. Wikipedia is a working draft of history. It's a continually changing snapshot of what is being done in the course of history. And I think that's a huge revolution in what kind of resource we have available.
Breaking news out of Mumbai, India. Deadly coordinated terror attacks there.
Gunmen went into those hotels and opened fire.
Indiscriminate fire had been witnessed. This is what he was talking about.
छिपे हैं 4 आतंकवादी ताज में और सेना ने. You can see the flames going up in smoke.
There have been multiple reports of gunfire.
It's not in print in the sense that it's unchangeable. It's in process, which means that it's always changeable. And so the fact that it is fluid is merely an indication that we're living in a digital age.
Brought it to the surface and made...
There are a lot of regimes in the world that depend on ignorance to keep them in power. And The invasion of knowledge really threatens those regimes.
Knowledge is power, knowledge is freedom. Those are, I think, the inherent goals.
An example of the maxim, knowledge is power, happened in Myanmar, where there was a cyclone, and the government knew that there was a cyclone coming, and the government controls all the media, and it failed to tell the people. Tens of thousands of people died as a result of hoarding that piece of knowledge. Well, the people had a right to know. Deciding to have a monopoly on information can be fatal.
Totalitarian and dictatorial governments block information, including information from Wikipedia, because they don't want to lose power.
They don't want an organized, active public to challenge authoritarian rule.
I was here in China, and I visited with some school kids, teenagers, and I asked them about the famous 1989 incident in Tiananmen Square.
A fractured spark in everyone. Does it still burn in you?
Two of the kids never even heard of it. One of the teenagers said that it was a big misunderstanding and a few students were arrested, but fortunately no one was hurt, which is an amazing thing to hear, because even the official version of the story from the Chinese government, which is disputed by others, does concede like a couple hundred people were killed. We said, well, what do you want to do after high school? And one girl said she's trying to get her SAT scores high enough to go to Princeton. What's going to happen to this girl? Let's say she goes off to the US and goes to Princeton and suddenly finds out, wow, like I wasn't even told that even the Chinese government says there were 200 people killed there, right? That's a huge problem, because now you've got somebody, one of your best and brightest students, who's gone overseas and now feels like, hey, I was ripped off. Like the truth wasn't told to me.
You know, what's going to change? What's going to bring down the totalitarian government in China? Is it going to be guns? Is it going to be tanks? Is it going to be missiles? No, it's going to be KJ. KJ is a 25-year-old girl who lives in Taiwan. And every day, KJ is on Skype, and she is talking to the mainland Wikipedians, and she's helping them get through the firewall. She's teaching them where the open proxies are. She's running interference for them in making sure that the open proxies are available for editing in Wikipedia.
Wikipedia not just for some people in this world. Everyone have right to read this article, and they have right to share their knowledge to other people. People have right to know how they think.
Wikipedia and most all sources of information are wonderfully subversive to totalitarian and dictatorial governments.
Saudi Arabia, for example, has a big restriction on information, so that's why we're all focused on trying as much as possible to push Wikipedia forward.
When I was in Saudi Arabia, in order to get on the internet, you had to go through a proxy server. Well, I pity the Saudi government trying to outsmart 13-year-old boys who are going to spend their lives figuring out ways to go around it. They're going to win.
This is happening. You can't stop this. You can put your finger in the dam for 5 minutes, but you're not going to stop people getting on the internet.
We want to give everybody that access so they can learn about tigers or the moon or the upcoming elections, so they can make better decisions as citizens. So it's important. Like, this is what I do. This is what it all comes down to, really.
The human immune system is all about. So if you can... Okay.
Really people deprived of information. People are finding stuff they want, stuff about science and about community and about things that were not available to them.
If I go back to my own home country, I'm able to access a computer, go through Wikipedia to be able to do some of my research work so that we all can benefit.
I didn't know much how Taiwanese people feel about our mainland Chinese. But with Wikipedia, when we are working on the same article, we cannot avoid that. through Wikipedia, it's unbelievable. I could make friends with a communist. So I think Wikipedia not only brings free knowledge to the world, I think that even promotes peace and mutual understanding.
The more diverse the Wikipedian base gets, the more of a worldwide view the information is going to have. And until we have that, how can we call it a real encyclopedia?
It is the younger generation of India who should get involved with Wikipedia movement, because it is actually a movement like our Gandhi's movement, which made India free, which is a movement of the 21st century.
You know, it's hard because I think a lot of the people who work on the Wikipedia are obviously sincere, and this is the way they're expressing their idealism, and their idealism is genuine. But it's very frequently the case that a generation of idealistic people band together and kind of lose themselves in their idealism. That's happened a lot in history, and usually the kind of idealism that subsumes individuals into some sort of group movement turns out to be pretty confused. So, for instance, the American 60s, which are still the reference point for idealism in America, were wonderful. I view myself as operating within that framework, and yet it's important to know all of the failures of it. It's important to know that some of the Marxist ideas, in every case, led to some of the cruelest regimes in history. There's, in a way, a natural tendency by technological optimists to think that if you connect a bunch of people together, this super being will emerge that's smarter than any of us. But that is just not true. In fact, if you just do it in a sloppy way, the super being will probably be a fascist. Unfortunately, human beings have a demonstrated ability to again and again and again form into mobs of different kinds.
And that was the mob that ruined the French Revolution, that ruined the Russian Revolution. And as a historian, I think I have a better understanding of that than a lot of these technologists and business people like Wales, who don't have much of a grasp of the way in which utopian movements have been corrupted by the crowd.
We're always going to live with the danger of crowds. The wisdom of crowds would be to understand the danger that they represent.
What it all comes down to is, what does Jimmy want on the site and what does he not? Okay, that's how it works. Issues may or may not be escalated up to him, but if the fight goes deep enough, he will appear and he will lay down the law. There are certain articles I have written that you cannot mention on Wikipedia because they're critical. You know, a site like anysocialmedia.net is not allowed to be mentioned on Wikipedia because Jimmy doesn't want it mentioned. A contributor, an American living in Japan named Charles Ainsworth, who has contributed more feature articles to the site than all but 6 other people. He's a respected contributor. He felt that the points made by anysocialmedia.net were valid and tried to make these points heard on Wikipedia. Even this longtime contributor was immediately banned from doing this, okay? And in the end, Jimmy Whale swooped in and said, this has gone on long enough, I support this ban. This happens again, shoot on site. Like I said, it's a bizarre world at Wikipedia. Shoot on site, says the spiritual leader of the world's most popular online encyclopedia.
These to Jimmy Whale.
I assume everybody who's used Wikipedia, the idea is for all of us to imagine a world in which every single person on the planet is given free access to the sum of all human knowledge. And that's what we're doing.
Of course, we all want free access to knowledge for everybody. I think that goes without saying. But there's this question of what is that knowledge?
One can only laugh when you hear something like that. And it's hype. It's the sort of silly thing that people in Silicon Valley will say over drinks.
You can't make a single encyclopedia for the sum of human knowledge because there isn't a single sum of human knowledge for most topics. And it's a bizarre idea about what knowledge is.
We've confused information with knowledge. The information is only as good as the research skills of the person looking for it and the background that the person has to fit the information into.
If you just survey masses of information, you just flooded with irrelevancies.
Intelligence is not a matter of just collecting from anybody and everybody and shoveling it into a format.
We are like a person who's very thirsty and needs to drink. And we were parched. And you used to get somebody bringing you a water in a dropper with 1 drop at a time. barely trying to, and you can't really be satisfied with it. Now it's like somebody opening a fire hose at you. Well, you can't drink out of a fire hose either.
In order to make knowledge free, we have to make it into some sort of singleton, rigid idea of knowledge. If we get rid of all the books in the library and we turn them all into sort of one big mashup book that no longer has any voice or any personality or any perspective, then we have made crappy, useless knowledgeable available to everybody for free.
What we're starting to move into is a world where what the truth is becomes a question of who you trust.
A lot of kids are consulting Wikipedia as the first and often the last source of information on anything that they're curious about. If it continues on in that capacity, we might have a generation of kids who have a fundamental confusion about basic principles of epistemology.
Now people look at Wikipedia and they say, oh, well, this was written by people on the, how can I trust this? And I think in the future, people are going to look at Britannica and say, what, you mean this was written by like one expert and reviewed by 2 editors? How could I possibly trust this?
I, as a user of Wikipedia, am very, very leery of it. I mean, I don't trust it at all. But I know that I will trust it in another 10 or 20 years.
It's not some project that they want to finish in 10 years and get away with it. It's something like for the next 100 years. We're thinking about that kind of goal. We can definitely achieve that. And I like that goal.
Every child in the world will need books to learn from. And when you have those books for free, more children can use education. So Wikipedia might become even more important than the traditional learning books.
If this is a revolution created by amateurs, by idealists who don't know what they're doing and who trash the family jewels of professional media, then in 25 or 50 years we're going to look back and we're going to be profoundly regretful.
Whether Wikipedia.org can achieve its goal as the whole sum of the human knowledge, I wish it could. But even if it couldn't, it's not a bad thing because we've already done so much.
I think expressing knowledge is like art. It has an aesthetic appeal. Building systems of knowledge is wonderfully rewarding and fun. That's actually always been sort of my life's goal. Since I helped inflict Wikipedia on the world, I'm perhaps one of the only people who could help start something better. I guess I sort of feel I have a kind of calling. I think that ultimately I owe it to people to sort of help undo a mistake I made.
Once before we did an interview and I was in Florida living with my, at that time, wife and daughter, and now my wife and I are separated, and I'm living part-time here in New York, and then I'm in Florida. I'm in Florida every other weekend, have my daughter for the weekend. So it's tough. The work has had its toll. I made a lot of choices to travel, to go out and spread the word, and it's cost me at a personal level. These are the choices people have to make in life, and sometimes you regret the choice you've made, and sometimes you think it was the right choice, and sometimes you just don't know. You go through a door and you can't go back, and so, you know, yeah, it's complicated.
The central question in whether Wikipedia will survive or not depends on whether the community stays together.
It just seems like there's always more and more people who want to change everything you wrote. There's more people who want to pick fights with you. So it's just a different community dynamic than it used to be.
Is it going to stop? I think you'd sooner argue with the law of gravity.
I think, personally, that the community cannot survive. I mean, there's such infighting, even among the core contributors. I don't see how it can sustain itself.
Only the apocalypse, I think, is going to stop Wikipedia in its tracks.
I don't think the work is ever done as long as the universe exists, and that's going to be around for at least, well, it depends. I'm sure you've seen this.
God knows. Oh, is this the current Wikipedia?
Yeah, this is your...
No, you know, I haven't looked at it since I wrote that thing.
You want to take a look at that real quick?
I actually would rather not. I've never read it.
Pulling up my wiki page, and let's see, he is most widely known for inventing voicemail systems. Well, I hope I'm most widely known for Cha-Cha now.
Serving 23 years as anchor of the Saturday edition of the CBS Evening News, moderator of Face the Nation, and so on and so forth. Interim weekend anchor of the CBS Evening News from March 2005 to August 2006. Oh, that's right. Covered 4 beats. So far, so good.
A social critic, activist, and playwright, best known as author of the bestseller People's History of the United States. Zinn's philosophy incorporates ideas from Marxism, anarchism, and socialism. All right, I'll accept that.
There were 3 errors. One of them was a kind of insignificant error about my book, my last book being named a notable book. It gave the wrong newspaper that named it as a notable book. Another one of them gave me a job title of a job I haven't held for 4 years.
Well, the first line happens to be false. Hebrew and Yiddish. It's got nothing to do with Yiddish.
My first entry on Wikipedia had an incorrect birth date. It actually had my brother's birth date. He's 3 years younger than I was. Somehow that got corrected by someone, not by me. I figured, why do I want to correct a date that's 3 years younger?
That's only the first line, you know, and we can go on from there.
It's actually pretty accurate because I think that my PR people have been here. It has all of my patents.
Has written 2 books, Face the Nation. My favorite story is from the first 50 years of the award-winning news broadcast, and this just in. Actually, I have written 3, and that is the one thing that's missing here. I wrote a book called The Acting President, and it came out in 1989. It was about Ronald Reagan.
Rosalind Zinn has had a role in editing all of Zinn's books and articles. That's true. She's my only editor.
Well, you know, it's not so bad. It's funny because it doesn't cover any of my technical stuff at all, but anyway, but it's fine.
It's taken from one bio. I have many bios out there. It's not bad. I mean, it's not wrong. It would give somebody an introduction to myself.
It looks okay.